Hey guys, what is up? Unrested back again today with another Osoroshi Saturday, even though it's Tuesday here in Japan. And today I'm going to do something I haven't really done before, and that is recommend some of my favorite horror movies for you to watch during the month of October. I know I love to watch horror movies all year long, but I know a lot of you love to do it around October, which I totally understand. I have a few you probably have heard of before, but I want to try and hit as many as I can that maybe you've never seen before. There's a bunch out there that people always recommend, like Ringu and Ju-on, and it's like, we've heard about these for centuries now, it feels like. These are old movies that everybody's seen who knows even the smallest bit about Japan. So, what I want to do is I want to dig in deep and possibly get you some stuff that you've never seen before. And I'm talking like maybe, not even on Netflix or Hulu or any of these streaming programs. You got to dig a little bit deeper. You may have to do some illegal stuff to get these movies, or just order them online. Give the directors a little bit of cash. Nothing like that would hurt. Let's jump in and start with our very first movie, and that is Pulse, also known as Cairo. I do not suggest you watch the American remake of this. Even the director Wes Craven, who made it, he's a pretty good horror director, but he had the whole movie mangled by the studio. And even when he was interviewed by Fangoria magazine, he said, I tried to make the movie as close as I could to the script that was Japanese, and then the studio totally butchered it. Do not watch it. So even he himself, the director, has said that the American version is horrible. The Japanese version by Kurosawa is incredible. It's got this very bleak, depressive, sort of Silent Hill tone. And let me just say, I know a lot of people are hyped about the new Silent Hills coming out, especially Silent Hill F. I cannot wait for this game to come out. If you're in the mood for that really deep Silent Hill feeling of like creeping terror, of psychological terror, this is the movie for you. And this is also the soundtrack for you. Check out the soundtrack to this movie. I have to say, it is up there with Siren, Blood Curse, and Silent Hills, Akira Yamaoka's OST. It's so creepy and so ambient and so disturbing. There's so many aspects of this movie that psychologically attack you and make it an incredible watch because, first of all, it deals with a very human emotion of loneliness, of depression, of feeling isolated due to technology. It's really good as kind of like a post-COVID movie too, because it kind of gets you back to that feeling of why so many people were traumatized by being locked in for so long. And it also gets you into that idea of how bad can a technology affect a generation to the point that they stop communicating properly face to face in real life. It deals with the horror of that, and it presents it in a way that's not like heavy-handed or overbearing. It just shows the story and the concept through the characters that you watch. It deals with two different stories. One is a group of friends, and I think, if I remember correctly, they work at a greenhouse, and slowly they disappear due to the Cairo curse. I don't want to go too deep into how exactly it ends up with them, but the other is a sociology, psychology major and a girl who's a computer tech major, and their relationship and how it develops, and them discussing kind of philosophically how they feel about the use of technology separating human contact over time. It's got this very grainy, sort of dark, depressive filter over it that gives it this sort of lingering darkness in every scene, even those scenes that are not horrific. And you will feel this really kind of muddy, misty overtone that lets the whole movie marinate in a sort of dark, depressing, grim reality of how technology, which I love technology, I'm not, one of these, I'm not going to become the Unabomber, how it can be overused to a point of losing a lot of human emotion. And the way they do this is just so deep and comprehensive with labeling different rooms that these people visit online as isolation rooms where they go if they feel alone. And these rooms kind of suck them in. And I don't want to go too much farther into the plot from there because I don't want to spoil it. But there's just so many layers to this. The soundtrack, the ambience. There's this mix between the soundtrack and the ambience and the movie's sound that meshes together so well that there's times where you won't know if you're listening to the music that was made for the movie or actually sound effects in the movie or actually a sort of almost ASMR overlay of people whispering in the background. And if you do start to hear like voices and stuff talking under certain scenes, don't worry, it's not you going crazy. They literally put that into the scenes to make them more psychologically terrifying. And it works. It works so well. Cairo, check it out. That's probably going to be the most relatable movie I'm going to mention. One you've probably already heard of. Now I'm going to get into the deeper stuff, the darker stuff. And this next one, this has to be one of the bleakest, darkest movies I've ever watched. This movie was so bleak that I thought about it for probably a couple weeks after I saw it. It's called Caterpillar. And it won actually a lot of international awards. And I gotta give a trigger warning. This movie is bleaker than bleak. If you're not in a good headspace, if you're not in a good part of your life, I would say skip this for now because it has to be the bleakest movie I think I've ever seen. I mean, it's more bleak than Ushijima-kun, than Are There Any Crybabies Out There? It's the bleakest movie I've ever seen. And it's dealing with a post-World War II veteran who is suffering through war injuries, I guess you would say, like war surgery that took away all four of his limbs, his voice, and the only thing he's left with is his eyesight, his ability to make a little bit of sound, and the ability to have sex. And that's it. And it kind of revolves around those three elements of sense left. And it shows how him and his wife did their best to survive post-World War II. And how even though the small village that he lives in calls him the war god because they want to call him that to honor his service to the Japanese military, he himself thinks very little of what he's become. And at first you're feeling very sorry for him, but it deals with a lot of the R word that he committed in war. So then you stop feeling sad for him. And then you also start to feel compassion for his wife, who, let me just say, the actress who plays his wife does a brilliant job. This woman should have gotten every kind of acting award possible for how amazing she acts. I always kind of mock Japanese movies for dealing with a lot of overacting due to their influence from Bunraku theater, but this lady, I mean, it's very believable with how she acts. She's forced to take care of this guy because he's, honored amongst their village as a war hero, and people try to do their best to help the couple by donating food and stuff because they're a small farming village, but life is just in shambles. I mean, obviously there's no job the man can work. He has no limbs, no voice. The wife doesn't work because it's old school Japan where the wife is a housewife, and she has to cart him around in sort of a food cart, I guess, or maybe like a wheelbarrow, the equivalent to a Japanese wheelbarrow. And she does this to bring him around town to hopefully get like some offerings from the different farming people around the town. And he himself doesn't really see a lot of point to his existence and is just steeped in misery. And you follow kind of like his psychological trauma post-war, his psychological trauma with dealing with his injuries, and his wife's. And it's hard to go in deep to it because it ends the way you expect it's going to end, but even that ending is like just bone crushing. Like you just think, holy crap, what did I just watch? It doesn't get into like gory, bloody, anything like that. It shows some pretty triggering R scenes from the war, but otherwise it's not overly gory. It's definitely 100% psychological when it comes to what this movie deals with, but oh god, is it ever bleak. I don't think it runs very long. It's probably a pretty short movie, and you'll get through it probably in about 80 to 90 minutes, but it will steep you in misery. So just be in the right mental place when you watch this one. Don't be anywhere near like a very grim point in your life or getting over a death or something like that. This would not be the movie to watch then. Caterpillar, check it out. Let's move on to something a little more upbeat. I don't know if I would call it happier, but it's definitely got a happy-go-lucky sort of directing to it. A sort of wacky, comical, almost like horror comedy sense to it, but it's still in the realm of a very gory movie. So if you don't deal well with gore, this is maybe not the movie for you. And I don't want you to get this mixed up, and I don't want you to think you have to watch part one to understand this movie. Meatball Machine 2, Kodoku. All right? This is a crazy movie. If you didn't watch the original Meatball Machine, I think it was made a long time ago. I want to say 1998, which it doesn't feel that long ago to me, but it's an updated version. It was made in 2017. Looking at the poster for this movie, you would still think it was made in early 2000, but no, it was made in 2017. And it is pretty much a way, way better high production remake of the old Meatball Machine. So like I said, you don't need to watch Meatball Machine 1 to understand Meatball Machine 2. In fact, I would probably say skip part 1. Part 1's good for if I guess you really love this series. But it's just like a super, super low budget. And this movie's already probably pretty low budget. So the older one must have been done on a $150. I can't imagine they spent a ton on it. And if you don't understand what the Meatball Machine is, it's pretty much an alien vessel that comes down to Earth and transforms the victim that touches it into a meatball machine. And a meatball machine is, I guess, a sort of biopunk, splatterpunk gore fest that makes every part of your body a killing tool. And our hapless hero is a beaten down salaryman who hates everything about his life and has been given the worst hand ever. And he's the person who stumbles upon this meatball machine and gets transformed. At the same time, after he gets transformed, his city gets quarantined because, an alien object dropped down in it. And the whole city area that he's in gets quarantined. He's cut off from everybody else except for who's quarantined within the area that he's in the city. And the characters that they insert into his story is wild. It's everything from like snack bar hostesses to other very belligerent salarymen to another meatball machine that he needs to fight. And God, describing some of the scenes that would probably get this video taken down. It deals with some very gory scenes where he's like killing people in ways that you would never think of. It deals with sexual scenes that brings sex into a sort of very strange splatterpunk, almost comical sort of biopunk, like body horror, I think is like the best way to put it. Comical body horror way that you would have never thought of seeing people's bodies or ladies of the night being transformed into things that I guess kind of blow your mind. You'll be like, what am I watching? What is this? It gets crazy. His story centers around him and a girl he meets who he kind of falls in love with, has to protect her from all the other meatball machines because he himself is a meatball machine. They form a relationship in which he sort of becomes this bodyguard for her to survive in this quarantine area of the city, and has to fight through masses of other people who are transformed. And that's the best way I can put it without completely spoiling the movie. Wow, is it a crazy one? And like I said, you don't need to see part one to understand part two. If anything, they should have called it remake or like reborn. And the effects, the effects are gonna make you laugh. I mean, I say it's gory, but when I say gory, I mean gory in the way of like Tokyo Gore Police or like comical gore, like obviously buckets and buckets of squirting, hydraulic driven pumping gore. Like not in the way where you think like, oh, that looks painful. No, this is just kind of a, okay, do they really need that much blood? Like how much fake blood did they go through to make this movie? More than Braveheart? Like this is insane. Give it a watch if you're wanting to feel a horror movie that won't leave you in a bleak state of mind. Meatball Machine 2 Kodoku. Next up, we got a interesting little movie that I kind of find it hard to find this movie again. I watched it and I was able to find the poster again. That was no problem. But I'm having trouble finding an English version of this movie because, yes, I do watch these with subtitles on. I watch them in their original Japanese, but I do put subtitles on because I want to understand every aspect. There's always going to be words within horror, especially things like Meatball Machine that gets into science that I'm just not going to understand the Japanese. And this is one that deals with kind of the old school sort of Edo era horror, but placed in the modern day and also put into a story with Japanese idols. And that is Momoiro Clover. That's the group, the idol group that's in this movie. They literally are the main stars. And it's about how they formed their group. And according to this movie, which is a mockumentary or a horror mockumentary, they made a deal with sort of a demon in a sense. And that is Shiroime, or White Eyes. That's the demon they made a deal with. And according to this, they make this deal where they kind of sell their souls for fame. And no one ever talks about this movie. Everybody brings up, I think there was a show on Hulu that was a girl band that did a horror series, and they talked about how horrible it was. I watched a little bit of it, and it was pretty boring. It didn't really capture my attention. But this one, I really like this one. There's times where the acting is kind of so-so because you're dealing with an idol band. Acting is not their forte. They're not known for their acting chops. But they do a pretty good job. Like, there's parts where they have to cry and be upset, and it's believable. Like, you're not thinking, wow, what is this? Like, this is horrible. And the story itself is actually pretty interesting. They make a deal with a demon, and you get to see their journey to the temple where they do this deal and how it affects their group and the people around them. So it doesn't hurt them, but it hurts a lot of the people around them and makes them as kind of evil entities themselves because the cursed not only envelops them, but I guess radiates from them after they make it with Shiroime. And if you've seen the Korean horror movie called Melody of the Curse, which is about a Korean girl band that makes a copy of a video that is a lost VHS video of an old idol group that curses them and everyone around them. If you like that movie, Melody of the Curse, then you'll like this too, because it's kind of the Japanese version of that, where their music and their curse affects everyone around them except them. And it's in pretty decent ways, like not ways that you're like, okay, what's all this blood and gore? This is like ridiculous. If this happened, like the news would be reporting on it nonstop. It's like subtle things like people's teeth slowly falling out or people going deaf, or it's interesting in that. And I like the fact that they keep it a mockumentary. This really works well for it, where it's dealing with like cameras following them around and recording them and kind of their development. If you liked movies like Accorto or The Cult or Noroi the Curse, you'll like the style of movie that this is, where it's kind of supposed to be found footage, and that is Shidoime with the group Momo Iro Clover acting their hearts out. And just to make sure I leave you with enough, I want to recommend a series, Senritsu Kaiki, the Kawaii Sugi File, which I don't know, that Kawaii Sugi always kind of cracks me up because it just means too scary. The too scary file. What files are you researching right now? Oh, the too scary files. In Japanese, it doesn't sound as lame, okay? I promise you. Like, there's lots of manga called Kawaii Sugi manga, which is like horror manga series. This is the Kawaii Sugi Files, in which I guess I never memorized names. This woman and this man who is like a TV staff have to go on research missions where they research different curses. You may want to skip the first one if you're tired of Kuchisake Onna. I know I am. The split mouth woman is kind of a little bit too overplayed sometimes in horror media. But after number one, number two goes into stuff that you've probably never heard of before. And they pretty much go on and on and on with urban legends and pretending to research them in Japan. There's times where the acting is subpar, but I mean, it's a super cheap TV series. They're decent, they're good enough, and they've got some great plot lines. You probably won't notice too much when the acting is super bad, because that kind of gets lost sometimes in translation. But you'll enjoy it, I think. I really liked it, and I'm pretty harsh on acting and horror in general. My wife absolutely hated it because the acting really pissed her off. She said, this acting's too bad, I can't watch this. But I like the story. I like the ideas more. I can always give horror movies kind of a pass on acting if the story is scary or creepy or a dark enough idea. And I think that's what the Kawaii Sugi Files do. And if I don't leave you with enough with those couple of horror movies I mentioned at the beginning, these TV series movies should be good enough, because I think each one's an hour to 2 hours long. So it'll leave you with a ton to watch. Let me know what you guys think today, if these were helpful in getting you a little extra taste of horror to watch during Halloween. If there's a movie you want to recommend, let me know, but don't really waste my time too much with movies that we've all seen a million times. I'm not slamming anybody for loving movies like Ringu. Ringu's really scary. Like, Ju-on's really scary. Like, they're good movies, but like, if you want to help out the audience and help me out too, recommend things that are a little more lesser known. Like, let me give you one last recommendation that you've probably never heard of. The Split Mouth Woman in L.A. Okay, that was a really weird American/Japanese horror movie I saw that is almost impossible to find, and I doubt very many people have seen The Split Mouth Woman in L.A. That's a insanely weird, obscure movie. That's what I'm talking about. Donate some suggestions that kind of really get out there in the weird factor or the unique factor. We know about the common ones that everyone's seen a million times, especially the ones that have like a American remake. The American remakes are almost always pretty bad. I'd say maybe like Ringu Part 1, the remake was pretty decent. Part 2 with the CGI horses, not so hot. Dark Water remake, so-so. It's kind of halfway there. But overall, I hope these help you out, giving you a little bit of scare, some popcorn time with a good horror movie. And until next time, I've been Unrested, and I can't wait to hear your horror movie suggestions. Have a good one.